Chapter 3, Geographic Regions. Current Issues Update. Transportation Gridlock. Approximately 85% of the 12 million people living in the Pacific Northwest occupy only 5% of the land area. The Seattle, Portland, Spokane, and Boise metropolitan areas are the most densely populated. These metro areas have serious transportation problems and many traffic-related issues that need to be solved. Traffic congestion and flow issues are the result of people working in one area but living in another, thus a commuter's nightmare. The region's most serious gridlock situation is the Seattle metro area. There are 3.5 million people living in the Seattle area, extending to Everett in the north, Issaquah to the east, Tacoma to the south, and Bremerton to the west. The Puget Sound I-5 corridor is a massive engineering challenge due to the Puget Sound's numerous islands, lakes, peninsula, and hilly terrain. These physical features present huge obstacles for area planners and government agencies. Gridlock has consequently retarded economic growth. 1 million people are expected to move into the greater Seattle area by the year 2020. How will this gridlock be solved? Cooperation between the public, city planners, and government agencies is critical. Current attitudes about space, time, and convenience must change as well. Time is of the essence. All right, we're going to go over this map right here because it is pretty much the whole ball game. It is what the chapter is about. So you have the geographic regions of the Pacific Northwest. So first things first, you have the coastal region. Again, you have the Pacific Ocean out here. Here's the coastal region. You have the Western Lowlands here. Seattle, Tacoma, Portland, and Eugene are all located in this area. You have the Cascade Mountains, and Medford, Oregon is in this section. You have the Basin region, which is really small, and it's this little part of Idaho and this part of Oregon. You have the Columbia Plateau, where you have us in the Tri-Cities. You have Bend, Oregon. You have Boise, Idaho, Twin Falls, Idaho, and Pocatello, Idaho. Then you have the Rocky Mountains. You have Spokane here, Coeur d'Alene here. And again, it also covers a fair distance. And that is the map. Geographic regions, keys to understanding. Basin region, located in south central Oregon and southeastern Idaho, arid climate, ranching and irrigation farming as the main economic activities. Cascade Mountain region, sparsely populated area, climatic and transportation barrier, popular tourist and recreation area. Coastal region, long, narrow area adjacent to the vast Pacific Ocean, tourism and recreation, trade, and forest products. Columbia Plateau region, the largest geographic region encompassing most of eastern Washington and Oregon, plus the upper Snake River Valley of Idaho, agriculture. Columbia River system, major tributaries are the Snake, Willamette, Pend Oreille, Okanogan, and Yakima rivers. Drainage basin about the size of Texas. Hydroelectricity. Puget Sound Trough, subregion of the Western Lowlands, glaciated area flooded by Pacific Ocean with rich farmlands, most heavily populated area, urbanized and major center of industry, trade, and commerce. Rocky Mountain region, rugged terrain covering the Okanogan Highlands, Blue Mountains, and most of Idaho. Forest products, mining, and tourism/recreation. Western Lowlands region, densely populated, industrialized, urbanized area in the Pacific Northwest. 3 subregions, Puget Sound, Chehalis Cowlitz, and the Willamette River valleys. Overview. Pacific Northwest has 6 major geographic areas. Coastal, Western Lowlands, Cascade Mountains, Basin, Columbia Plateau, and Rocky Mountains. Each region has many subregions which add to the complexity of the natural environment. In human terms, the Western Lowlands is the most important. Its mild climate and adequate resources make the region a very hospitable place to live. The Columbia Plateau is the largest geographic region and is a major producer of cereal, grains, fruit, vegetables, and livestock. The region is also an energy, hydroelectric, and nuclear producer. The coastal Cascade Mountains and Rocky Mountains regions are sparsely populated, but are also major areas of scenic beauty and protected areas of the Pacific Northwest's unique natural landscape. Basin region plays a minor role in the human history of the Pacific Northwest. The Pacific Northwest is geographically young in comparison to the remainder of the North American continent. It maintains its youthful resistance to human attempts to develop the natural environment. The region is an ideal place to work, to live, and to play. The excellent overall quality of life is due in no small part to the environment, an environment that will be under increasing developmental pressure in the future. Location and size. The Pacific Northwest is a geopolitical region in the western United States. The region consists of only 3 states, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. The region's geographical area of 253,250 square miles represents about 7% of the total area of the United States. The Pacific Northwest is larger than France, but smaller than Texas. The Pacific Northwest is located along the central portion of the western coastline of the North American continent. The region lies entirely within the 48 contiguous states of the United States. The boundaries between the 42nd degree and the 49th degree north latitude and the 111 degree and the 125th degree west longitude. The region extends about 480 miles north and south, and about 617 miles east to west. Physical diversity. The Pacific Northwest has many varied physical features, such as narrow coastal plains, steep coastal cliffs, sandy beaches, rugged snow-capped mountains, fertile river valleys, numerous islands, scenic peninsulas, evergreen forests, deep glacial lakes, dry sagebrush grasslands, productive irrigated farmlands, a basalt plateau, and hills shaped like sand dunes. This region is characterized by picturesque volcanic mountains, rolling hills, a semi-arid plateau, and extensive forested areas. Level land is very limited. The region is one of the most scenic in the United States. As one of the last remaining wilderness areas, it is a popular recreation and tourist region. The remaining portion of this chapter is devoted to the major physical features of each state, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. In addition, each geographic region, coastal, western lowlands, Cascades, Columbia Plateau, Basin, and Rockies will be discussed. We're going to skip over to Washington. With an area of 71,300 square miles, Washington is the smallest of the 3 Pacific Northwest states. Even though Washington is geographically the 2nd smallest state west of the Mississippi River, it is the 18th largest state in the United States. About 4,756 square miles of the state are covered by inland and coastal water bodies. The land portion of the state is only 66,544 square miles. Washington is 370 miles east to west and 239 miles north to south. Boundaries. Washington is bordered on the north by the 49th parallel of the north latitude and the Canadian province of British Columbia. On the south by the Columbia River in the state of Oregon, along the 46th parallel, and on the east by the 117th meridian of west longitude and a portion of the Snake River shared with Idaho, and on the west by the Pacific Ocean. Washington's political neighbors are Idaho to the east, Oregon to the south, and the province of British Columbia, Canada to the north. Saltwater bodies. Washington's irregular and frequently indented tidal shoreline measures 3,026 miles. Puget Sound extends the Pacific Ocean into Washington, providing excellent deep water inland ports and waterways. The major inland waterways of Washington include the mouth of the Columbia River, Willapa Bay, Grays Harbor, the Strait of Juan de Fuca, Puget Sound, and Hood Canal. Freshwater bodies. A moist climate combined with several major mountain ranges provides vast quantities of fresh water for creeks, streams, rivers, and lakes. The state abounds with numerous man-made and natural lakes. Washington's major lakes include Chelan, Crescent, Sammamish, Washington, and Whatcom. The largest lake in Washington state is Lake Chelan. It's 51 miles long, 1 mile wide, and more than 1,486 feet deep. It is the third deepest lake in the United States. Lake Chelan is a perfect example of an inland glaciated fjord, a flooded glaciated valley. Franklin D. Roosevelt Lake, the artificial reservoir behind Grand Coulee Dam, is the state's largest freshwater body. This lake has an area of 123 square miles, a maximum depth of 375 feet, and a length of 151 miles. In addition, Washington has hundreds of alpine and lowland lakes, as well as many man-made reservoirs. Major rivers. Washington has many major rivers, and countless small streams and creeks. Due to a very moist climate west of the Cascades and a much drier climate east of this mountain range, its rivers have different characteristics. Western Washington has numerous rivers because of its abundant rainfall and heavy snowfall in the higher elevations. These streams and rivers are very short due to their close distance from the mountains to the ocean or Puget Sound. Usually the rivers have a high water volume and frequently flood during the winter months because of the region's winter maximum precipitation and runoff from snowmelt. The major rivers of western Washington include the Nooksack, Skagit, Skykomish, Snoqualmie, Puyallup, Nisqually, Hoh, Chehalis, Lewis, and Cowlitz rivers. Eastern Washington has fewer but longer rivers. The source of water for these eastern rivers is primarily from the melting snow in the Cascade and Rocky Mountains. It's important to remember that these rivers flow through a semi-arid region. Area farmers and residents are very dependent upon these rivers for their freshwater supplies and for irrigation water. The area's most important river is the Columbia River. The other major rivers of eastern Washington are all major tributaries of the Columbia as it flows toward the Pacific Ocean. These tributaries include the Pend Oreille, Spokane, San Poil, Okanogan, Methow, Entiat, Wenatchee, Yakima, and Snake Rivers. Columbia River. The Columbia River is the dominant river system of the Pacific Northwest, and it is one of the great rivers of the United States and the world. It flows south from British Columbia through the eastern portion of Washington and along the northern and western edges of the Columbia Plateau. It turns west to form the natural political boundary between Washington and Oregon. The 1,243-mile long Columbia River drains 258,000 square miles of the North American continent. The river's primary source of water is snowmelt from the surrounding wall of mountains. Columbia's river's average water volume flow is 265,000 cubic feet per second, or an average annual volume of 183 million acre feet. This is second only to the volume flow of the Mississippi River. This is enough water annually to cover the entire state of Washington to a depth of 4½ feet. The Columbia's maximum record flow occurred in June 1894 with 1,240,000 cubic feet per second. The Columbia has a steep gradient, vertical drop of 2,635 feet from its headwaters in British Columbia to its mouth at Astoria, Oregon. On the Pacific Ocean. This steep gradient, combined with the narrow river valley and steep-walled cliffs, enable the Columbia River to be extensively dammed and developed for hydroelectricity. Since 498 miles of the Columbia River are located in the Canadian province of British Columbia, the United States and Canadian governments have mutually developed the river's vast potential for the betterment of both countries. Like the United States, Canada's dams provide water storage as well as hydroelectric power. Mountains. Washington not only has lowlands with many freshwater and saltwater bodies, but also several major mountain ranges. These major highlands include the Coastal Range, Willapa Hills, Olympic Mountains, Cascade Range, Okanogan Highlands, Blue Mountains, Selkirk Mountains, and foothills of the Rocky Mountains. In a region where volcanic peaks abound, Mount Rainier is the largest volcano with the highest elevation. Mount Rainier is 14,411 feet above sea level. It is the fourth highest mountain in the lower 48 contiguous states. Geographic regions. After gaining a brief understanding of each state's major physical features, it is now appropriate to subdivide the entire Pacific Northwest into 6 major geographic regions. Each region has unique characteristics that set it apart from other regions. The 6 major geographic regions of the Pacific Northwest include 1. Coastal, 2. Western Lowlands, 3. Cascade Mountains, 4. Columbia Plateau, 5. Rocky Mountains, and 6. The Basin region. Each of the major regions is divided into smaller subregions. The first region to be discussed in more detail lies along the Pacific's coastline, the coastal region. Coastal region. The coastal region lies along the western coastline of the United States. This long and very narrow region is only 40 to 70 miles wide, extending south from the Strait of Juan de Fuca for nearly 500 miles to California's northern border. The coastal region is an especially beautiful area of the United States. Traveling from north to south, a visitor would see the following features: the Strait of Juan de Fuca, the rugged snow-capped Olympic Mountains, the evergreen forest in the Olympic Peninsula, broad sandy beaches, the productive Grays Harbor, Chehalis River lowland, the Willapa Bay and Willapa Hills, the mouth of the Columbia River, Tillamook Bay, the northern coastal range, Coos Bay, the scenic Oregon coast, the turbulent Rogue and Umpqua rivers, and the forbidding Klamath-Siskiyou Mountains at the California border. Coastlines. The Oregon and Washington coastlines are very regular. There are only 6 major indentations: Coos Bay, Tillamook Bay, the mouth of the Columbia River, Willapa Bay, Grays Harbor, and the Strait of Juan de Fuca. The coastal region is sparsely populated. The aforementioned inlets are also sites for the region's largest communities: Coos Bay and Astoria, Oregon, Aberdeen, Hoquiam, and Port Angeles, Washington. Each city has a lumber industry, a fishing industry, and engages in both foreign and domestic trade. Topography. Normally, most coastal areas are nearly level coastal plains. This is not true along the coastal region of the Pacific Northwest. There is a surprising variation in the elevation of the region. Elevations approach nearly 8,000 feet above sea level in Washington's rugged Olympic Mountains, located in the northern part of this region. After a series of low hills and coastal ranges in the center portion of the region, the elevations rise to 5,000 feet in the Siskiyou and Klamath Mountains along the California border. The region's west to east profile is bell-shaped. The profile begins at sea level, climbs to the top of the Olympic Mountains and the coastal ranges, then rapidly descends to nearly sea level again in the east. Refer to the rain shadow vignette in Chapter 2. Climate. Coastal region bathed by the California and Davidson Currents, warm ocean currents located off the Pacific Northwest, British Columbia, and southern Alaskan coastlines, has a very mild but moist climate throughout the year. This temperate climate provides lush vegetation and supports dense coniferous softwood forests. Extensive evergreen forests cover the coastal region except where the forests have been cleared for logging, farming, and urban development. Temperature. The coastal region's climate is the most moderate in the Pacific Northwest. Its winter temperatures are surprisingly warm for an area midway between the equator and the North Pole. Temperatures rarely fall lower than 20 degrees Fahrenheit in the winter. Winter average maximums between 35 degrees Fahrenheit and 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Summer temperatures are relatively cool, with summer maximums normally 55 degrees Fahrenheit to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Only in the rarest situation would heat waves of short duration have maximum temperatures more than 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Precipitation. Although temperatures are moderate, the total amount of precipitation in the coastal region greatly exceeds the norm in the Pacific Northwest and Western United States. The same ocean currents that provide moderate temperatures also bring moist air masses. Thus, the entire region receives abundant precipitation throughout the year. The area's maximum rainfall in the majority of its snowfall occur during the winter months. Even though summer months are somewhat drier, most areas receive more than 40 inches of precipitation a year. Some areas in the coastal region, however, receive very heavy annual precipitation. For example, the windward side of the Olympic Mountains receives over 200 inches of rainfall annually. The southern coastal region receives much less rainfall than the Olympics. Generally, the region's winters are mild but wet. The summers are drier and more comfortable. See Chapter 2. Economic activities. One result of the coastal region's mild, rainy climate is the abundance and variety of plant and animal life throughout the coastal regions of the Pacific Northwest. The vast forested wilderness is sparsely populated. There are only a few small cities and rural communities such as Port Townsend, Sequim, Port Angeles, Forks, Hoquiam, Aberdeen, Raymond, Ilwaco, Astoria, Seaside, Lincoln City, Tillamook, Newport, North Bend, and Coos Bay. The region's main economic activities include fishing, forestry, general farming, and tourism. The coastal region is underdeveloped. Western Lowlands. The Pacific Northwest's second major geographic region is the Western Lowlands. It is located between the mountains and hills of the coastal region and the Cascade Range. The Western Lowlands extends about 400 miles north to south, but is only 50 to 70 miles wide. This area is the most heavily populated, urbanized, and industrialized in the Pacific Northwest. The Western Lowlands are made up of three large subregions: the Puget Sound Trough, the Chehalis, Cowlitz, Columbia River valleys, and the Willamette River Valley. The Puget Sound Trough and the Willamette River Valley are heavily populated and urbanized. Puget Sound Trough. The Puget Sound Trough is located in western Washington. It is a densely populated, fertile lowland that is the hub of economic activity. Major urban areas such as Seattle, Tacoma, Bellevue, Bremerton, Bellingham, Everett, and Olympia are centers of urban and industrial activities. Sprawling suburbs are competing with productive farming communities for use of the remaining space. The Puget Sound area has hundreds of small to medium-sized islands, such as the San Juan Islands, Whidbey Island, Vashon Island, and Bainbridge Island. It is also the site of many peninsulas. These include the eastern coast of the Olympic Peninsula and all of the Kitsap Peninsula. Due to glacial erosion, Puget Sound has an irregular shoreline. It has numerous deep sheltered harbors such as Hood Canal, Bangor, Elliott Bay, Seattle, Commencement Bay, Tacoma, Everett, Bremerton, Olympia, Anacortes, and Bellingham. The Puget Sound Trough is a beautiful area providing excellent opportunities for recreation, trade, tourism, industry, and farming. Chehalis-Cowlitz River Valleys. The second subregion within the Western Lowlands is the Chehalis-Cowlitz River Valley, which contains three major river valleys located between the Puget Sound and Willamette River Valley. These valleys are the Chehalis River, Cowlitz River, and the Columbia River Gorge. These lowlands are not exposed directly to the Pacific Ocean and its saltwater arms. This subregion has fewer people and less industry than its neighbors to the north and south. The area has proportionately more people farming and lumbering, with fewer working and living in an industrialized urban setting. Willamette Valley. As visitors cross the Columbia River from Vancouver, Washington to Portland, Oregon, they enter the third subregion, the Willamette River Valley. The Willamette River Valley was the historic objective of thousands of early pioneers who endured countless hardships while traveling on the Oregon Trail during the mid-19th century. The Willamette River produced a broad, fertile valley that is a prime agricultural region. Today, the same valley is the home of such cities as Portland, Eugene, Salem, Springfield, Beaverton, Corvallis, Albany, Lake Oswego, Gresham, and many other suburbs. Many of these growing communities engage in the development of modern high-technology industries. Physical terrain. The Western Lowlands region is an optimum place to live and work. Physically, the area's elevation ranges from sea level to about 1,000 feet. However, one should not get the impression that the region is flat, as it is not. It is generally hilly. This region is physically unique because of its many river valleys and floodplains. It also has an irregular indented shoreline with numerous islands and peninsulas. The Western Lowlands region is universally covered with evergreen forests. This produces a wonderful natural playground for recreational activities and a pleasant work environment for the residents. Climate. The Western Lowlands climate is West Coast marine. The Western Lowlands generally experience slightly warmer summer temperatures and cooler winter temperatures than those in the coastal region. The region receives slightly less precipitation than the coastal region. Precipitation. The Western Lowlands lie in the rain shadow, see Chapter 2, of the coastal range in the Olympic Mountains. Thus, the total precipitation is generally less than on the windward slopes of the coastal region. The area receives its maximum rainfall in the winter. Summer and early autumn months are much drier. The average annual rainfall ranges from 15 inches at Sequim, Washington, to nearly 100 inches in the western foothills of the Cascade Mountains. The regional average is about 40 inches annually. Temperature. Temperature ranges in the Western Lowlands are very comfortable throughout the year. Although the winters are rainy, the temperatures rarely go below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Winter temperatures range from 35 degrees to 55 degrees Fahrenheit. The summers are drier, sunnier, and more pleasant in the Western Lowlands than in the coastal region. Maximum summer temperatures generally range between 65 degrees and 85 degrees Fahrenheit. Economic activities. The moderate climate encourages growth of dense coniferous softwood forests or lush grasslands where the forests are cleared. A wide range of green plants and wildlife abound in the region. Great stands of Douglas fir, western red cedar, Sitka spruce, and western hemlock support a variety of important forest industries. Cleared forest lands now yield impressive quantities of vegetables, berries, flower bulbs, fruits, nuts, nursery plants and shrubs, some grains, dairy products, and beef. Today, the beauty of the western lowlands and its comfortable environment still attracts permanent residents as well as tourists. More than 2/3 of the total population of Washington and Oregon live in these lowland areas. Major cities located within the western lowlands in Washington include Bellingham, Mount Vernon, Marysville, Everett, Linwood, Edmonds, Seattle, Kirkland, Bellevue, Sammamish, Bremerton, Lakewood, Puyallup, Renton, Kent, Auburn, Federal Way, Tacoma, Lacey, Olympia, Kelso, Longview, and Vancouver. In Oregon, the western lowlands major cities include Portland, Gresham, Tigard, Oregon City, Lake Oswego, Milwaukee, Beaverton, Salem, Albany, Corvallis, Springfield, and Eugene. The western lowlands economy is becoming more industrialized. Some of its major industries include forest products, transportation equipment, electronics, and high technology. The economic potential of the Western Highlands remains very strong. Cascade Mountains. Just east of the western lowlands, also lying along a north-south axis, are the Cascade Mountains. The Cascades are one of the major mountain ranges of the United States, forming a geographic region in the Pacific Northwest. The Cascade Mountains extend from southern British Columbia, Canada, through the states of Washington, Oregon, and end in Northern California. Natural barrier. The Cascade Range represents a formidable physical, climatic, and transportation barrier. The mountains are very wide to east and west in northern Washington, but narrow to a mere ribbon pattern through Oregon. Because of their physical size, averaging about 6,000 feet in elevation, with many volcanic peaks above 10,000 feet, they have been a major hindrance for east to west transportation. In fact, the Cascade Range has only a few mountain passes and only one major lowland, where the Columbia River flows through the Columbia Gorge. Volcanoes. The Cascade Mountains are part of the Pacific Ocean's Ring of Fire. The Ring of Fire extends along the coastline of the Pacific Ocean and spans 4 continents. This region is lined with a network of highly active volcanoes and consequently earthquake zones. The Ring of Fire contains numerous volcanic mountains with several prominent cone-shaped peaks. The tallest and best known of these volcanic peaks is Mount Rainier. It is 14,411 foot elevation, makes it the 4th highest peak in the lower 48 contiguous states, excluding Alaskan peaks. Mount Rainier is a massive glacial covered peak that towers 8,000 feet above its neighboring 6,000 foot Cascade Mountains. The other major Cascade peaks include Mount Shasta, Mount Adams, Mount Hood, Mount Baker, Mount Jefferson, Glacier Peak, Three Sisters, Mount McLaughlin, Mount Stewart, Mount Shuksan, Mount St. Helens. Climate. Besides being a natural barrier to transportation, the north-south oriented Cascade Mountains are a climatic barrier. The Cascades form a clear division between 2 very different climatic realms. Generally, areas of the West Cascade Crest have moist climates and are very mild. Conversely, it's drier to the east. Annual precipitation reaches 100 inches on the western slope and decreases to only 20 inches on the eastern slope. Rainfall is frequent throughout the year, but the Cascades normally receive extremely heavy snowfalls during the winter. Mount Rainier held the record the world record with 1,224.5 inches or 102 feet of snow between February 19th of 1971 and February 18th of 1972. The new record snowfall for Mount Baker was established during the winter of 1988 to 1999. Mount Baker received 1,140 inches or 95 feet of snow. The Cascade Mountains' heavy annual snowfall provides late spring and early summer river runoff, especially significant for those eastern slope rivers flowing through the semi-arid regions of Washington and Oregon. Highland climate. Due to the great range in elevation, temperatures vary considerably in the Cascades. Normally, the summer maximum temperatures are cooler, but the winter maximum temperatures are much colder in the higher elevations than in the western lowlands. Obviously, large sections of the Cascades, especially all of the major volcanic peaks, remain snow-covered throughout the year. High mountain areas have no true growing season. Temperature changes provide different seasonal activities for outdoor enthusiasts. Snowy winters provide excellent skiing and snowmobiling. The pleasant summer temperatures attract hikers, fishermen, hunters, campers, and mountaineers. The cooler temperatures and heavy precipitation produce dense evergreen coniferous forests. Fir species are the most common on the western slopes. Various species of pine are more prevalent on the eastern slopes where there is less rain. These coniferous forests support a wide variety of birds, small animals, and big game animals such as elk, black bear, cougar or mountain lion, mule deer, bighorn sheep, and mountain goats. Inhabitants. Cascade Mountain region is very sparsely populated. There are a few small communities on both sides of the mountain's crest, but no major cities. A sampling of these mountain communities include Winthrop, Sandy, Leavenworth, Roslyn, Skykomish, Darrington, Stevenson, Oak Ridge, Union Creek, and Pinehurst. The residents usually work for the government, log the forests, mine the natural resources, or provide services for thousands of tourists. A large portion of the Cascade Mountains region is owned or controlled either by the state or federal governments. These public lands may be set aside as natural parks such as Crater Lake, Mount Rainier, and North Cascades, or state parks, forest lands, wilderness areas, and recreation lands. The Cascade Mountains provide a formidable travel barrier between eastern and western Washington and Oregon, but they also preserve the scenic beauty and protect wildlife. The Cascade region is a virtual playground for outdoor enthusiasts. The region's greatest assets are its magnificent forests, its serene natural setting, and its huge water storage capability. The Cascade Mountains region, properly maintained, should be a natural showcase for future generations. Columbia Plateau. The largest geographic region of the Northwest is the Columbia Plateau. The region covers about 193,000 square miles. It is the world's second largest lava plateau. Only the Deccan Plateau of southern India is larger. The Columbia Plateau's dimensions are approximately 400 miles from north to south and 500 miles from east to west at its widest point. The Columbia Plateau lies between the Cascade Mountains to the west, the Rocky Mountains to the east and north, and the Great Intermontane Basin to the south. The Columbia Plateau region includes most of eastern Washington, eastern Oregon, and the upper Snake River Valley of southern Idaho. Formation. This unique physical feature was formed 10 to 15 million years ago. The Columbia Plateau was constructed by as many as 55 different lava flows. It's not a perfect plateau, but an eroded tableland with at least one side of steep cliffs or an escarpment. Elevations vary considerably throughout the Columbia Plateau, with low elevations in the major river valleys and much higher elevations in the mountainous areas, especially in the Blue Mountains. The Columbia Plateau is dissected by the Columbia and Snake rivers, as well as their tributaries. Steep basalt cliffs help to contain the course of these huge rivers. Subregions. As a result of its great size, the Columbia Plateau region is physically very complex. Thus, it has many important subregions. The northern part of the Columbia Plateau, the subregions include the Columbia Basin, Waterville Plateau, Quincy Basin, Channeled Scablands, Palouse Hills, Wenatchee Valley, Yakima Valley, and the Pasco Basin. The central parts of the Columbia Plateau are interrupted by the Seven Devils, Wallowa, and Blue Mountain Ranges. On the Oregon side of the Columbia River is also the Umatilla des Chutes Plateau. The southern and southeastern sections are dominated by Harney High lava plains and the upper Snake River Valley, respectively. Climate. The Columbia Plateau region's basic climate reflects definite continental influence. It is an arid to semi-arid region characterized by hot, sunny summers and cold winters. The climate varies from one location to another because of the latitudinal north to south range and the major differences in elevation. Precipitation. It is important to understand that the whole region is virtually surrounded by the Cascade and Rocky Mountains. These mountain barriers have a drastic effect upon the annual precipitation amounts received by the Columbia Plateau region. The rain shadow effect reduces the average annual precipitation below 20 inches. Several areas within this region receive only 5 to 10 inches of precipitation annually. The climate in these areas could actually be classified as desert. Precipitation usually at its heaviest during the winter months. Summer rainfall is infrequent and usually the result of thunderstorm activities. Temperature. Generally, the Columbia Plateau region is much hotter during the summer months and much colder in the winter than the coastal and western lowlands regions. Summer maximums are often over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Winter minimums frequently drop below 0 degrees with below freezing readings common from November to March. Natural vegetation. The dry climate causes a definite change in the natural vegetation. The Columbia Plateau's most common vegetational cover is sparse steppe grassland with sagebrush bunch grass in the drier areas. In the higher elevations in areas of 20 inches of precipitation, well-spaced stands of pine trees exist. The natural vegetation is well suited to the region's semi-arid climate. Drought-resistant species tend to dominate the landscape. Extensive farming and irrigation projects, especially in the Columbia Basin and Upper Snake River Valley, caused many man-made changes to the natural vegetation. Sagebrush and bunch grasses are being replaced by agricultural crops and domesticated plants. These crops include wheat, corn, barley, oats, alfalfa, vegetables, and fruit trees. The once naturally barren landscape is rapidly turning into vast man-made garden with modern applications of technology and irrigation water. Wildlife. The wildlife of the Columbia Plateau region is abundant and varied. The natural habitat supports a variety of small animals such as rabbits, coyotes, antelope, deer, pheasants, quail, grouse, doves, hawks, eagles, rattlesnakes, and rodents. Larger game animals such as elk, moose, wolf, cougar are commonly found living in the isolated forests and mountain areas. The Columbia Plateau is a hunter's paradise. Inhabitants. The region's human inhabitants are unevenly distributed over this huge area. Most of Idaho's population lives in the upper Snake River Valley of southern Idaho. Its major cities in this subregion include Boise, Caldwell, Twin Falls, Pocatello, Nampa, Idaho Falls, Rexburg, and Meridian. Oregon's eastern region is very sparsely populated with only a few small cities and towns, such as Burns, Bend, Redmond, Prineville, John Day, Madras, LeGrand, Ontario, and Pendleton. Vast areas southeast of Southeast Oregon are virtually uninhabited. Washington's Columbia Basin is agriculturally developed with a significant population. Major population centers such as the Spokane area, the Tri-Cities, Richland, Kennewick, Pasco, Wenatchee, Walla Walla, Ellensburg, Moses Lake, Pullman, and Yakima are located along the edges of the region. Most of the region is rural farming area, which is sparsely populated with small isolated towns. Economic activities. The Columbia Plateau region's economy represents a mixture of farming and manufacturing. Fertile soils, a long growing season, and abundant irrigation waters allow farmers to produce outstanding yields of wheat, barley, oats, hops, alfalfa, corn, beans, apricots, potatoes, sugar beets, apples, pears, peaches, grapes, cherries, vegetables, and specialty crops. In addition, the dry grasslands are excellent grazing areas for cattle, sheep, horses, and other livestock. The region's urban centers produce many manufactured products. Hydroelectric power and available fresh water have attracted metallurgical, aluminum and silicon plants, and nuclear facilities, Hanford, Washington. Other important regional activities are food processing, service industries, high technology, aerospace, transportation equipment, tourism, recreation, wood products, and mining. The region's industrial and agricultural developments are producing a sustained growth in population and economic prosperity. Rocky Mountains. The Rocky Mountain region consists of the largest series of mountain ranges in the Pacific Northwest. The Rocky Mountains encompass thousands of square miles. It extends hundreds of miles north, south, and east and west. Portions of the Rocky Mountains are located in northeastern Washington, eastern Oregon, and most of Idaho. The Rocky Mountain region lies north and east of the adjacent Columbia Plateau region. Origin. The Rocky Mountains are an older and more heavily eroded mountain range than either the Olympic or Cascade Mountains. Stretching from Alaska to Mexico along the western section of the North American continent, the Rockies are the country's largest mountain range. Only a small segment of the Rockies exists in the Pacific Northwest. Subregions. The Rocky Mountain region is a very complex, rugged area. Numerous spur mountain ranges and their many river valleys may be organized into 4 subregions. 1, northern ranges, 2, central ranges, 3, eastern ranges, and 4, southeastern ranges. A brief discussion follows each region's physical organization and identification of specific ranges located within its boundaries. Northern ranges. The Northern Range subregion is located near the United States-Canada border. These northern ranges east of the Cascades are characterized by their north to south pattern with separating river valleys. This region was greatly affected by the succession of continental glaciers. The region includes Whitefish, Mission, Selkirk, Sandpoil, Kettle River, and Huckleberry Mountains. Sometimes a large portion of these northern ranges is collectively called the Okanogan Highlands. Elevation in the Okanogan Highlands range from 4,000 to 9,000 feet above sea level. This region has several major river valleys, including the Okanogan, Columbia, Kettle, Sandpoil, Spokane, Pend Oreille, and Kootenai. Central ranges. The Central Mountain Range rises from the central sections of the vast Columbia Plateau, especially in northeastern Oregon. The major ranges include Blue, Seven Devils, Wallowa, Elkhorn, Greenhorn, Aldrich, Okono, and Strawberry Mountains. Some peaks are nearly 10,000 feet above sea level. These rugged mountains present difficult barriers to overland travel and human inhabitation. Eastern Ranges. The Eastern Ranges are the most diverse and complicated mountain system in the Pacific Northwest. The Eastern Ranges are located primarily in the eastern and central Idaho, forming a natural boundary with Montana. Major ranges of this eastern subregion include the Coeur d'Alene, Bitterroot, Clearwater, Salmon River, Sawtooth, Lost River, Lemhi, and Beaverhead Mountains. Except for isolated mining, farming, and lumber communities, this rural area is very sparsely populated. Southeast Ranges. The fourth subregion, the Southeast Ranges, represent only a small segment of the Rocky Mountain region. Only the Snake River Mountains and Caribou Mountains are located almost entirely within the Pacific Northwest. The areas Wasatch, Grand Teton, and Wyoming Mountains are located primarily in the neighboring states of Montana, Wyoming, and Utah. Climate. The Rocky Mountain region is not only physically isolated and rugged, but it has a very harsh climate. The region's winters are universally long and very cold, while summers are shorter and cool. Snow is common throughout the winter months and may occur throughout the year in the higher elevations. Summers have a significantly less rainfall and moisture. Overall, it is a severe climate and not generally conducive to supporting large human populations. In these highland areas, the average temperatures are affected by the elevation, latitude, position, and distance from the Pacific. Normal winter temperatures are usually well below freezing. Below 0 degrees Fahrenheit is frequent, with some cold spells plummeting the thermometer to -40 to -50 degrees Fahrenheit. Summer temperatures are generally more pleasant. Maximum readings of 85 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit are rare. Generally, the higher the latitude, the higher the elevation, and the greater the distance from the Pacific, the climate will be colder and the growing season will be shorter. The Rockies generally receive less total moisture than the Olympic and Cascade Mountains because of its interior location and the rain shadow effect. However, the Rocky Mountain region has greater annual precipitation amounts than the adjacent Columbia Plateau. The region receives more precipitation in the winter than in the summer. The average precipitation totals 10 to 60 inches throughout the region, with most areas receiving 20 to 40 inches. Natural vegetation. The natural vegetation of the Rocky Mountain region reflects the total annual precipitation. Areas receiving less than 20 inches of precipitation support sagebrush and sparse steppe grasses. Areas receiving more than 20 inches are usually forested with Douglas fir, lodgepole pine, ponderosa pine, and white pine varieties of softwood trees. The higher elevations of the eastern ranges support denser strands of evergreen trees such as Douglas fir, spruce, cedar, and hemlock. Basically, the region's grasslands support grazing cattle and sheep, while forestry is the main economic activity in the timberlands. Wildlife. This rugged environment supports an interesting variety of animals. It is a haven for big game hunters. Some of the best stream fishing in the United States attracts thousands of non-residents to the region. Game fish and game birds and big game animals abound. Sportsmen provide a major portion of the region's tourist dollar each year. Population. The Rocky Mountain region is sparsely populated because of its physical isolation, rugged terrain, and harsh climatic environment. Only a few small lumber, mining, farming, and tourist communities exist. These communities include Omak, Okanogan, Colville, Coeur d'Alene, Wallace, Kellogg, Mullen, Sandpoint, Bonners Ferry, and Sun Valley. The lifestyle is somewhat isolated and is definitely rural. It undoubtedly has its own merits, including a lower crime rate, fewer crowds, less noise, less traffic congestion, and cleaner air than the Pacific Northwest's urban and metropolitan areas. Basin region. The Pacific Northwest's smallest geographic region is the Basin region. It occupies only two small sections of southern Idaho and Oregon. This area is along the northern edge of the huge Intermontane Basin of the southwest section of the United States. The Intermontane Basin includes most of the states of Nevada, Utah, Arizona, and a smaller segment of California, Idaho, and Oregon. One unique feature of the region is that all streams and rivers flow into the basin but never reach the Pacific Ocean. Subregion. The Pacific Northwest Basin region only has two subregions. One subregion is in south central Oregon near Klamath Falls on a high lava plateau located east of the Cascades. The second subregion is a very mountainous area in the southeast corner of Idaho. Climate. The Basin region's climate is very dry. The whole region is classified as desert except for the northern part of the Wasatch Mountains in extreme southern Idaho. Annual precipitation amounts vary between 5 to 20 inches annually. Average winter temperatures range from 16 degrees to 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Winter temperatures frequently fall below zero. Average summer temperatures range from 66 degrees to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. The region's high elevation partially explains the cool average temperatures despite its southern latitudinal position. Economic activities. Overall, the most important characteristic of the region is the region's dryness. The dry climate, coupled with a short growing season, reduces the region's forest and agricultural potential. Short, sparse steppe grasses and sagebrush dominate the natural vegetation. Livestock farmers frequently use these areas to graze cattle and sheep. Other major economic activities include general farming, tourism, and lumber products. The region's major city is Oregon's Klamath Falls. Excellent volcanic soils and availability of irrigation water makes this region a very productive farming area. And that is it for this chapter.